Following the calling of the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria strike, states have unveiled strategies to implement the Memorandum of Action to ensure financial autonomy for the Legislature and Judiciary. The MOA was signed on June 4 by the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, JUSUN, the Parliamentary Staff Association of Nigeria, PASUN, and the federal government and the 36 state governors. Under the terms of MOA, the governorship have 45 days to implement strategies to ensure full financial autonomy for two arms of government. States such as Delta, Ebonyi, Plateau, Kano, and Oyo, to mention a few, are already processing the decision. Tundu, reactions, good news?
I suppose all's well that ends well, but this just goes to stress the glacial pace of governance. President Buhari signed the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution in June of 2018, and here we still are. It took an amendment of 2018, a 64-day strike, to actually get this show on the road, finally. That amendment was to do with exactly what this topic is about, financial autonomy for the legislature at state level and judiciary at state level. Obviously, that guarantees, or well, hopefully guarantees their independence, so it is crucial for our democracy. Yet, it took all these years. It took the courts being closed for 64 days and the absolutely devastating effect on the dispensation of justice that occurred with that to actually get to the point that we're at. The article in this day canvasses 18 states across Nigeria, from Sokoto, Katsina, Ondo, Ekiti, Ebonyi, Anambra, talking about how they all are finally on board and they're all going to finally implement, I have to stress, an amendment to our constitution that was effected all the way back in 2018. I mean...
Okay, I think we should remind ourselves of the basics. Why did the presidency intervene? And I said previously on this program that, look, the intervention of the presidency of President Buhari with regard to autonomy for state legislature and for state judiciary will probably be remembered as one of his major interventions, one of his major legacies, if at the end of the day that is properly operationalized. And the issue, of course, is that, look, allocations to state judiciary and local councils go through the state governments. And these state governments constituted themselves into some kind of funnel. They insist that that's constitutional. But at the end of the day, the charges that they take, administrative charges that they take, at the end of the day, leaves the judiciary and the legislature with very little money. The state will have taken the bulk of it. In fact, in the case of the local legislature and even local governments, the state governments, they determine what they should give, what they should not give at a particular time. Now putting state judiciary and the legislature in very difficult situation. And we know, of course, that many of these governors are emperors in their states. For financial reasons, state houses of assembly more or less bootlick in front of the governor, so that it will make resources available to them for the houses of assembly to be able to function. And that in itself became an obstacle to the democratic process. If you have a state judiciary that is at the mercy of the state government, you have a legislature that is at the mercy of the state government, then what it means, of course, is that the doctrine of separation of powers, is violated, and the state governors become, in a real sense, emperors. So that's the crisis that the alteration of the constitution as put in place by the Buhari administration tried to cure. And you recall that immediately at that time, the governors kicked. They threatened to go to court. And all of this, JUSUN, in fact, went to court 3 times. And 3 times, the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, they won all 3 cases. Dr. Olisa Agbakoba also, in one other matter, went to court on their behalf. The court ruled in their favor, but the governors simply refused. They said no, they had powers under the Constitution. Now, after this long strike that has not served the purpose of, efficiency within the system. Can you imagine the backlog of cases that the courts are going to come and deal with, and the amount of work that will put on the head of judges that are already overworked, courts that are already, not properly serviced in many states of the Federation. But JUSUN has put a caveat to this memorandum of action. The judicial workers are saying if after 3 months there is any evidence that the governors do not respect the terms of that memorandum of action, then they will have no option but to go back on strike. So it's not as if it is over yet. So I don't think we should jubilate yet. We need to see on the part of the state governors that they will even respect the terms of this memorandum of action, on the basis of which judicial workers have suspended their strike, and on the basis of which Parliamentary Staff Association of Nigeria took part in the negotiations that the papers are now reporting. So the onus is on those governors. And one of the things that, one of the items of that memorandum of action, there's still some reference to charges. I think there must be proper agreement on what will constitute those administrative charges that the states always talk about. And then some of the states, the Juson and Pasan, they are talking about bills to set up in the states that do not have them, Assembly Service Commission and Parliamentary Service Commission. Let us also hope, that that other item in the memorandum of action will also, be put into effect. Although some states claim that they had already respected the autonomy of the legislature and the judiciary in their states. But what is important is about the principle that no arm of government should oppress, suppress the other, and that the rule of law, which recognizes the independence of the judiciary and also of the legislature, should be respected.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Batia Antundu. All right, that's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we have Rotus Odiri, Michael Wilson, Adesu Omoro, Aaron Akerjola to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19 and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotus Odiri is here to give us an African business update. Over to you, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. African Business Update kicks off with Financial Derivatives Company Limited, which is, of course, run by Bismarck Rawani, member of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, managing director, founder of FDC. They've released a report, their bi-monthly reports, which states that the petroleum industry bill, non-passage of it, has amounted to about $15 billion lost annually in terms of lost investments in the oil and gas sector. Now, of course, on your screen, you should see the Speaker of the House, Femi Gbajagbiamila, speaking at an oil and gas conference, a two-day conference that passed about a couple of weeks ago, where he said that the PIB, Petroleum Industry Bill, should have been passed in March and should have been passed in April. Now he's saying it's going to be passed this month of June. Ahmad Lawan, Dr. Lawan, who is, of course, the Senate President and also the Minister of Petroleum Resources, Timipri Silva, they've all said that it's going to pass this month. But FDC in their report is saying that, look, with the amount of time that has passed, with how long this has been in front of the legislature, it might be a little too late since oil and gas companies are now moving towards renewables. According to them, there's about 3 areas that are still being worked on, last-minute tweaks, deregulated gas supply to power plants, the NNPC becoming a publicly traded company for purpose of corporate governance, and then having a single regulator to oversee the entire industry. Also, the PIB also calls for the full deregulation of the downstream sector, which, of course, the Nigerian Governors Forum, we broke that story, has supported it to the tune of about 300+ naira per litre. So they're saying that that could also be an issue. But the key thing in what the report says is lack of urgency, and that's something that pervades a whole number of other policy issues when it comes to Nigeria. Lack of urgency, and they're saying that, look, the fact that this thing has been sitting in front of the legislature for almost 2 decades now, or more than, in fact, means that we've wasted a lot of time and it needs to be passed as soon as possible. So that's on that front. Still on more oil and gas news, the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, the PPPRA, over the weekend put out a document seen by media with respect to the downstream sector and its deregulation. PPPRA actually said that it's causing increasing poverty and impacting the masses. So, you know, it's interesting now. You've got the NNPC that has been pushing for deregulation, saying that landing cost of fuel is increasing, saying that they're not going to be able to transfer as much money as they can, remit money to the Federation account. They've been, you know, saying that we talked last week, 26 billion naira lost in about 6 or 7 projects because of opportunity cost of the cost of subsidies. Now you've got the PPPRA adding their voice to this. So, you know, you've got you know, this is really interesting because this is something that an argument that a lot of people have been making for quite a while. So now you've got the government, which I think is trying to ramp up, at least in the public, the need to end these costs and with their dialogue with Labour. So very interesting to see the Petroleum Pricing Products Regulatory Agency jumping in there and also adding their voice to it, saying that, look, we're giving a tax cut to the wealthiest Nigerians on this on the downstream sector with respect to the price of fuel. They also said outside of Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, everywhere else, other areas, they probably pay higher than the 162 naira price per litre. And also that you're seeing because of this, also smuggling is also taking place. You would end smuggling if you, in fact, you know, deregulated the downstream sector. Something that your exclusive interview with President Buhari was touched on as well. To the CBN. Central Bank had a 2-day fair in Lagos. They talked about the fact that their agriculture funding, agriculture intervention funds are part and parcel of improving food security in Nigeria. You know, I think it's the Central Bank's Director of Corporate Governance, I believe, Mr. Osita Nwanusobi of the CBN, who said that, look, the central bank needs to assist in the marketplace because of where food prices are, because of the impact of food security. And I mean, by the way, inflation coming out tomorrow. We should be getting inflation figures for May from the Bureau of Statistics. We're going to see if what happened in April was an anomaly where we saw a little bit of a deceleration, and we'll see whether food prices or rather food inflation will continue to accelerate in the 20% region. Finally, Tanzania is adding gold to their to their reserves. Tanzania 50% of their exports from solid minerals. Gold's earnings for Tanzania in 2020 amounted to about $2.9 billion, almost $3 billion. So they're wanting to add gold to diversify their reserves. They're wanting to ramp up investment in the mining sector. Very interesting lesson for Nigeria here. Tanzania's gold exports or mineral exports increased by about 30% in 2020 due to a 2017 major reform of their mining sector. So it's something for us. I know we focused on mining here. We're trying to get artisans to be able to produce more gold bars, but we need to get, again, urgency, reform, hurry up, get these things passed. That's our African business update.
Great insight as always. Yeah. Okay, the fierce urgency of now, Rotus, we can't harp on that enough. Let me quickly talk about PIB. Number one, and that's why I faulted that World Bank report that was hinging the economic recovery of Nigeria on the passage of PIB. You know, we gloss about things a lot. It's so easy for the Speaker of the House of Reps to say, oh, we ought to have passed this. We're always saying we ought to have passed this, but we've not passed it. And the economy is losing money because we've not passed this. I mean, the Chinese have a saying. They said the best time to do something was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. That's all I'll say concerning PMB. The best time to do something, right, 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Well, quickly on the PIB, the questions to raise is why is it that a piece of legislation like this will take up to 14 years? That bill, the process began 14 years ago. 14 years later, 3 different governments, or is it 4 governments later, we've not been able to make significant progress. When this assembly convened in 2019, one of the major promises made by the current Senate president was that the petroleum industry bill would be one of their priorities. There have been public hearings and all of that, but up to this moment, nothing has happened. What you hear now is the Speaker of the House of Representatives saying that, oh, it will be passed before the end of this year. What exactly is the problem? Lack of political will, clash of interest, conflict of interest? Because many of the details, even in the PIB, as was last forwarded by the executive after a review, many of the issues there may even have to be reviewed further. Many of the IOCs are already disposing their onshore assets. Many of them are redesigning their business interests in Nigeria. And all of these issues, again, you have community stakeholder interests. The definition of many of the terms relating to those stakeholders have not also been properly agreed upon. So this is a piece of legislation which you could have on the table for maybe another 5 years. I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen. And if Nigeria is losing $15 billion annually, then of course you can calculate it and see how, this in itself is a problem that needs to be addressed. As for the CBN, yes, the CBN says it's supporting agriculture in order to ensure food security. But do we have food security? The Anchor Borrowers Program is a good program. The Agric SMIS program by the CBN is a good program. But the CBN, we keep saying, the Central Bank of Nigeria, keeps stretching itself because those who are supposed to take up those other responsibilities are not doing it. And then you have a CBN that describes itself as a people-oriented CBN, which has to take on additional tasks. But I don't think we can really have food security if we do not have physical security. Many farmers no longer go to the farms, even in the southwest of Nigeria, in the northwest, in the northeast, everywhere, because bandits do not allow the farmers to go to their farms. In Niger State, some dairy companies that were supported by the Central Bank of Nigeria, their cattle was taken away, their factories were destroyed. At the end of the day, some of those companies lost money in excess of 2 billion. Now, that in itself is a major threat. We need to see a connection between what we call food security and also the general security, atmosphere in the country.
Rotis, earlier I referred to the glacial pace of government, but the PIB situation where we've had 14 years of non-passage of this simple bill, quite frankly, leaving $15 billion a year on the table just smacks of eye-wateringly extreme incompetence. It is a disgrace. In fact, all the stories you've brought this morning just paint a picture of poor governance. We're still talking about fuel subsidy in 2021. And this whole issue with the CBN about talking about food security, it sounds great until you actually look at it. The National Collateral Registry Act was passed in 2017. Just in 2017 was it realized that, oh, hang on a second, huge swathes of Nigeria do not have any collateral, cannot get credit, and therefore cannot work and contribute to the economy. Why are we still crawling? It's actually really a beggar's belief at this point. But thank you, Rotis, for your update.
And as for that statement, as for that statement from PPPRA, you refer to the negotiation with Labour over the prices or the pump price of fuel. Now, that negotiation with Labour, what actually is happening? Do you have any information? Because it cannot go on eternally, and then, of course, the PPRA is talking about 1 trillion naira subsidy, which is not sustainable. PPRA has not said anything new this time. The question is, they should stop this scaremongering about we'll remove fuel subsidy, when is it going to be removed?
Period. Well, thank you, Rotis. Moving on now to more business updates. Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. So we had lots of photo opportunities over the weekend at G7. There was a lot of nuance about China, a lot of Brexit bickering. Joe Biden challenged the other G7 leaders to take on China's rising global influence. They didn't sort of join in, really. He's going to European capitals on his way back home. But that message really from Biden didn't get through. Everybody else didn't quite get it. But there was a lot of nice photo opportunities and a lot of bickering over Brexit, as much as you'd expect. So that's the global overview. As far as Asia markets are concerned, a little bit muted today because Australia and China and Hong Kong are closed today for holidays. Nikkei, though, rose 0.6%. They had some decent industrial figures there. The big action really later in the week, China releases its industrial output and retail sales on Wednesday. So we're looking very closely at that. And there is this overhanging business in China now in Guangdong province, COVID-19, another outbreak there. There's wondering about what's actually going on. Of course, we don't know at the moment. If that gets murkier, then the markets will be affected by that. So let us turn our attention to the United States. And we saw little bits in record territory, as we always see towards the end of the week. But the big one this week is the FOMC meeting, the Federal Open Markets Federal Open Markets Committee, the central bank interest rate setting committee in the United States. What will their reaction be to whether inflation is actually, it's the usual question, is that we've tried this many, many times on this program, and lots of people are scratching their heads right now, whether this inflation spike is, we could able to look through it, or whether it's something a bit more fundamental from that nobody really knows. There won't be a rise in interest rates, but what there might be, is a slight reduction in the level of QE and so on. The argument again, about inflation is that before the pandemic, was there a rise in prices? No, there wasn't really. Leisure-related reopening. Once all that plays out of the CPI, then we'll get some real figures. So I suspect that we will have to wait and see about that a couple of further months. I know I always say this, but there's no point in getting too excited about things if the central banks are going to actually look through them. Bitcoin up 10%. Elon Musk now suggesting that Tesla might take payment in cryptocurrencies again. What more need I say about this? If it's reacting to every tweet that Elon Musk says, what is the point of it? I really don't understand it. But anyway, for what it's worth, that's what's happened. Let's talk about the space race. Jeff Bezos has auctioned a seat for $28 million on his first space flight. And the winning bidder will fly to the edge of the space with the Amazon founder. That'll be a treat. He's not a great conversationalist, but then again, the view out the window might be quite nice. And also his brother Mark as well. What a treat that will be for $28 million. Meanwhile, Virgin Orbit, the satellite launching spin-off that Richard Branson is behind, wants to go public through a SPAC, and there should be a valuation of about £3 billion. A deal is expected to be announced in the coming week. So what did the leaders of G7 actually say? Well, they pledged more than 1 billion coronavirus vaccines to poorer nations. They wanted to show that they are an alternative to China's debt diplomacy, as they called it. They also backed that minimum tax of at least 15% on large multinational corporations. Again, very cynical about that. We haven't heard from countries who actually have a lot lower minimum rates of corporation tax in order to attract multinationals there. But it was a 3-day summit and all seemed to have passed reasonably well. As far as the UK is concerned, senior ministers have signed off on a decision. Now they're going to delay the opening of lockdown from beyond the 21st of June, maybe for another 4 weeks. That means that nightclubs will still stay closed. People will be encouraged to work from home, and the extension will be put to a Commons discussion, i.e. a vote, this month, and there could be a considerable backbench rebellion about that. A big date for UK economic data this week. We get retail sales figures, and also we'll get confirmation of the fact that the growth, and this is before the announcement of this further lockdown, that growth is the highest in this country in manufacturing for 30 years. As far as commodities are concerned, oil, International Energy Agency pushing prices higher, relatively optimistic about what's going to happen as far as developing economies are concerned. US dollar making gold wilt. There is an inverse relationship between the two for all those obvious reasons we've actually talked about. And again, if we're going to see more dollar strength during the week, then gold will be retreating. It's about $64 an ounce as we speak. That's your global view.
Right, Michael. Great insights as always. For me, this G7 meetings are like another sort of like pantomime Berlin conferences, because what do? They just sit there. They think they know the best approach to the problems of developing nations, and they don't get anything done. They give you handouts, and they feel they can rule you and rule the rest of your life in poorer nations. I think it's time for Africa to look in the way of trade and stop receiving aid from all this, Berlin conference-like people. But I want to talk about inflation. It's big now in America. There's now a resurgence. People are going back to work, but they're leaving the jobs they used to do before, and they're looking for higher paying jobs as the economy starts to heat up. So some people are not picking up some jobs. They're going for higher paying jobs. They have a choice. And so would you say that the prophecies of Thomas Piketty has finally come to pass, that if you put money in people's pocket, they can make better choices when it comes to getting a job?
I don't agree with Thomas Piketty. No, I don't. And I'll tell you why, because I feel it's about creating business. It's not about putting money in people's pockets, because that reflects exactly the sort of problems that you've just put your finger on, as you always do, which is this, that people are getting more money and they're looking at jobs and thinking, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to be paid as little as that. It's not creating work. It's not creating business. What it's doing is forcing employers at the moment to put up wages to counter the fact that people are very happy, thanks very much, or a lot of people are, staying at home. This is not the American dream, as I understand it. I thought the dream was to go out and work very hard and make as much money as possible, pay taxes if necessary, whatever rate they happen to be, but create entrepreneurs, create businesses. I thought that was the American dream. So no, I don't agree with what Thomas Piketty says. I think that's absolutely the wrong way to go about it. What you should be doing is giving the background, the environment for people to create their own businesses and to generate their own successes. Well, that's the way that life has always been in successful economies.
Well, I was going to refer to Elon Musk, the head of Signia in South Africa. Says that Elon Musk is guilty of market manipulation with regard to Bitcoin. When he tweets, the prices either go up or go down. By yesterday evening, Bitcoin had gone up again to about 10.2%. And in fact, that particular South African is asking that the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission should investigate Elon Musk for his manipulative behavior. The second point has to do with China in G7. They couldn't really forge a consensus on what to say about China beyond the economic behavior of China and human rights. In fact, President Macron, was saying that the G7 is not a body that is hostile to China. And at the end of the day, in that 25-page communique, the commentary on China is considered to be rather mute, contrary to the expectations of the United States. Why is China so important that the G7 could not form a clear consensus as to how to react to it?
Right, G7 first of all, and China, simply because every nation at G7, and again, back to your original point about this, are they representative? I don't think they are anymore, but anyway, that's another discussion. But that they have different ways of looking at things. France has a different way. Macron is very, very concerned about an election coming up next year. He's very much concerned about his agriculture. He's very much concerned about exports through the EU to China, as indeed is most of the EU. I think Biden was unrealistic. He may not be versed in this kind of thing. You do not go to a G7 expecting one, unanimity from members, and B, very strong comments about everything. It's a chance for leaders to meet face to face. That's all it is. As I said to you before it happened, most of it's agreed by civil servants long before the leaders actually sit down. There was the usual kind of bickering, which you'd expect about Brexit. Of course, there's going to be bickering about that because it's been a very unpopular move as far as a lot of countries in the EU is concerned. Not as far as Canada's concerned, not as far as the United States is concerned, I would hasten to add. As far as China's concerned, they probably don't care one way or the other. So we're not going to get unanimity out of that at all. As far as Bitcoin's concerned, and Elon Musk, I've said many, many times on this program, and I take no side about this. I'm just saying that if I were to talk up investments that I had, then I'd soon have, through a public voice like Arise, for example, to Africa and the rest of the world. If I were to promote stocks that I'd invested in, A, I'd be out of a job, quite rightly, and B, I'd have the authorities after me. So yes, I mean, I couldn't possibly comment if that's what the South African gentleman is saying. Absolutely, but nothing that we haven't said before. I find it rather strange. But the SEC, make no bones about it, and make no mistake about this, are looking at Bitcoin and looking at other cryptocurrencies, not government-based cryptocurrencies, not gov coins, but things like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and all the rest of it, and wondering what their status actually is and whether they need to get involved. So, yes, I mean, investigations are taking place.
Indeed. Very quickly, Mr. Wilson, is it a case of B3W versus BRI, or is that Build Back Better World initiative really no match for the Belt and Road Initiative?
Oh, well, the Belton Road, this rather weird thing called Belton Road. I mean, the road applies to the seas, doesn't it? What's that got to do with roads? I don't know. Belt applies to corresponding economies being joined up and so on. Again, it's a very, very clumsy phrase. Would something that G7 does compete against that? I don't know. You'd have to ask your African leaders who have actually indebted themselves to China in many, many ways, as have a number of other developing countries around the world. China comes along with debt, and suddenly, if you don't watch out, you're a prisoner of the debt. It's as simple as that. So I don't think there is any comparison at all. I would refer you to what I said before about this, that if China wants a place at these kind of tables, which it clearly does, then it's going to have to moderate the way it goes about its business. It's as simple as that. And it's enlightened self-interest. Never, ever failed.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I hope a lot of African nations don't sleep on the Silk Road China has given them with all the debt they're collecting from China. Thank you so much, Michael. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesuwa Moro is here with us. Adesuwa, great to have you.
Thank you very much, Rufai. Good morning, guys. Over 175 million people have been sickened by the coronavirus globally, with at least 3.8 million fatalities. Also, over 2.3 billion doses of corona vaccines have been administered globally, according to the Johns Hopkins University tally you have on your screen. Cases are waning in some parts, but available WHO's data suggests there's an increase in cases in Americas, Africa, and the Western Pacific regions. Speaking of Africa, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases on the continent surpassed 5 million over the weekend. The southern region in Africa remains the most affected. In Nigeria, in the last 24 hours, 7 cases were confirmed from 3 states, namely Lagos, Kwara, and Rivers State. Meanwhile, over 639,000 people in Nigeria have received a second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So the second dose exercise is still ongoing, and that represents 31.8% of the population targeted in this phase so far. Now, the 3-day summit of the G7 ended, of course, with a diverse set of initiatives, including a pledge to vaccinate poorer countries against the coronavirus. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson held a press conference at the conclusion of the summit. He said the group would pledge at least 1 billion doses, with half of that coming from the US and 100 million from Britain alone. Now, I can tell you that these pledges are not entirely new resources. For instance, the 500 million doses coming from the US will be purchased by the second tranche of the $2 billion promised by the US to COVAX initially. And of course, the 100 million doses coming from the EU had also been previously pledged in a summit in May. So not all of these new commitments, not all of these pledges are actually new commitments, beg your pardon. The WHO chief, Tedros Ghebreyesus, and other public health officials globally have praised and commended the G7, but they say it is not enough. Tedros Ghebreyesus says to truly end this pandemic, 11 billion doses are needed to vaccinate at least 70% of the world's population by mid-2022. And South African president, of course, who was also at the summit, used the opportunity to pledge again for patent waiver. He's optimistic that this summit has provided an opportunity to expand conversations on waiving intellectual property when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines. Let's quickly go to Brazil, where after participating in a maskless motorcycle rally through the streets of Sao Paulo, President Jair Bolsonaro has been fined $100 by state officials there. Now, the violated rules require masks in public places, and it's been there since May 2020. The president is insisting that it is useless to wear face masks after getting your vaccines. This has been disputed, of course, by most public health officials because they are saying that vaccines that we have at the moment are designed to protect recipients from getting sick and not necessarily from being infected. Russia, let's go to Russia. You recall that President Vladimir Putin has been touting Russia as one of the countries that had responded to this pandemic better than most other countries in Russia. However, the capital capital, Moscow, has reported 7,704 new infections on Sunday, and that's the most in a single day since December 24. Now, the mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, has announced a non-working week beginning today, with non-essential workers told to stay at home in an effort, of course, to stop the spread. He's also announced incentive, a car lottery to speed up vaccination, because we have also seen from data coming out from Russia that vaccination rates are quite low in the country, despite what the president says.
Well, let's start with the G7 on COVID-19. One decision, yes, a contribution of 1 billion vaccine doses promised to show solidarity with the rest of the world, to show that the developed countries want to support poorer countries. Second thing was agreement on plans for the future to ensure that, the entire world is more proactive. And then third is the consensus that the COVID-19 pandemic constitutes a common enemy for the whole of the world, and hence concerted, collective action is needed. However, welcome as the decision to contribute, 1 billion doses, and to say that by 2022, the G7 will have helped to ensure that, the world is vaccinated. That move has been criticized. Campaigners say it shows a lack of ambition. The WHO says, well, it is too small in terms of effort, because the world will need about 11 billion vaccine doses to be able to achieve the herd immunity, global herd immunity of 70%. So 1 billion doses will not scratch the surface. Other questions have been asked. Who will fund these vaccine doses? Are there other countries that will join the initiative that will add to it? Nobody knows at the moment. 3, is the target of 2022 feasible? Because in terms of the details, there is a lot to be done, and that could take months, it could take years. And that is why Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, is saying that what is in fact required with regard to COVID-19 is for the world, the G7 and other similar bodies, to come up with an immunization plan that is actionable, and that, look, it has to start, that contribution has to start almost immediately. There were other issues that they considered, but since we're discussing COVID-19, these are the major issues and the concerns that have been expressed. Now, you talk about Jair Bolsonaro. Well, should anybody be surprised? He's been fined the equivalent of 78 pounds. He was fined in Manahao in May, about $58 for similar reasons, for refusing to use the mask, and he remains stubborn in that regard. This is the same president who has allowed the Copa America to take place in 4 states of Brazil. His political allies are the governors of those 4 states. And yet, when Venezuela arrived on Saturday for the Copa America, which began yesterday, 12 officials and players tested positive. So this is, a president who doesn't believe in science. He doesn't even believe in COVID-19. After all, he said it's just a flu, a mere flu. And it's because of people like him that will raise issues about the importance of leadership in the global struggle to contain the pandemic.
Well, what's happening in Moscow is hardly surprising, given even what's happening in the UK. Just with COVID, you can never be complacent. The whole UK was gearing to the June 21st, was going to be announced officially today, but that's hanging in the balance now, and they're considering, the UK government that is, a further extension of 4 weeks to reopening, and I'm sure the UK population find it completely maddening. But this is the thing, it all depends on the numbers. So what is happening here in Moscow, even now that we see the Sputnik 5 vaccine being exported and what have you, there is a very low uptake in Russia, and the numbers are climbing, and the government just has to act.
In all of this, I think it goes back to leadership. And when we'll write the story of COVID-19 after all of this ends, we should pray sometime soon, it will be how bad leadership led to the death of a lot of people. Boris Johnson, that is even looking all good now, will have to account for those deaths that he could have avoided. Jair Bolsonaro will have to account for a lot. And his own judgment will come very soon. The elections are just around the corner in Brazil. He will be facing Inácio Lula da Silva. The people will be the judge. He'll get his own judgment. He'll get his own report card there. But in all of this, too, we need to salute people that have done well, that have shown leadership. The likes of Jacinta Ardern, great woman, has been able to nip this in the bud in New Zealand. The likes of the Taiwanese president, another wonderful woman that has been able to nip this in the bud. Yeah. And that's what we should look at strongly. So leadership makes a difference. Leadership makes the difference. Let's not forget that. But thank you so much for your time at this hour.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Before we begin with our guests, Nigeria and Ghana are seeking to improve naval ties on how to tackle the growing insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. Ferdinand Duroha tells us more.
Modalities for setting up a regional naval task force is one of the proposals deliberated as senior Navy officers from Nigeria and Ghana seek solutions to the growing insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea. The Gulf of Guinea is one of the most dangerous waters in the world. Besieged by criminal elements and pirates, these threats have affected maritime safety and undermined global trade and regional development.
Notably, the transboundary and transnational nature of maritime crime makes the security of the maritime domain a task beyond the capacity of any country acting alone. It is against this backdrop that this bilateral engagement was convened at the instance of the heads of government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Republic of Ghana towards addressing the maritime security challenges within the region.
We are proposing that we have a collective naval operation. We can have a task force, ECOWAS naval task force, maybe under the umbrella of what we already have, the ECOWAS integrated maritime strategy, which has set up a maritime security architecture to deal with maritime security issues. We should go beyond the information sharing that we're doing now, using those structures to go into real operations. So we are proposing an ECOWAS naval task force. It just reminds me of what we did in ECOWAS.
Crime knows no boundaries. Crime has no color. Crime should simply be treated as crime. If we all agree that these are criminal activities that are inimical to our national interest, then we should be collaborating in flashing them out wherever they are, be they around the anchorage of Ghana or within the Nigerian anchorage or wherever they are.
Some other issues deliberated include breaking down the maritime borders, information sharing, deploying armed guards on fishing vessels, and setting up transit corridors for commercial fishing. Other prominent institutions involved in the discussions are the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Nigeria Ports Authority, and the Ghana Maritime Authority. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise News.
All right. Welcome back. Still the Arise News channel this morning. To Lagos, where security groups and operatives, I should say, dispersed a group of protesters that gathered at Ojota near the Ganifawemi Park, Lagos, for the June 12th protest. The youthful protesters over the weekend gathered early in the day, and they were on a street procession when what appeared like a civil engagement by the policemen stationed at the park turned forceful as security personnel shot tear gas canisters at the protesters and journalists covering the event. The police authority later explained that they had been forceful in stopping the protest, saying there was no formal request. But it was their word against that of the organizers. Tokubo Yetunji has got details on this. Let's see.
It's a democracy day with a difference in Nigeria. Despite the withdrawal of the Nigerian Students Association from the plan to stage a nationwide protest to mark the day 24 hours earlier, some group of people still took to the street of Lagos early in the day. Ganifawemi Park in Ojota, the designated venue, was surrounded by security personnel who had taken positions much earlier. That made the protesters start their march from the Keto axis. They were engaged by the police officers in what seemed a civil interaction as the demonstrators made their demands. But in a sudden turn of events, some of the policemen started shooting tear gas canisters at the crowd. More shots were fired, and in no time, The canisters gave way to bullets being fired into the air. Journalists were not spared.
At this point, the June 12 protest organized by some activists, some youth activists who have taken to the street from the K2 axis down to the Galefa Park in Ojota, has been dispersed by police operatives who first started shooting tear gas canisters, but eventually started shooting live bullets at people, and they're chasing people in the street as we talk to you now. They're shooting into the air.
We are gathered here to relive the vision of June 12, 1993. The struggle that started June 12, 1993 and lasted in 1999 until the military handed over power. That struggle envisioned and fought for a democracy that will work for all Nigerians.
Although the crowd thinned out, but the security forces remained, with some patrolling while some of their leaders came in to assess the situation.
People have the right to say their protest or whatever. The moment that hoodlums want to attack, we give them. Please don't cooperate among yourselves, don't fight.
They explained the use of force earlier, but it was their word against that of the protesters.
Yesterday, we had some information on the social media that people should not come out, markets should not open, just to create panic. And we counter this one now by issuing a press statement, encouraging them to come out and told them that yesterday we are on top of everything. There are so many protesters that have been arrested now. There is Nicolas Sumba, you have Larry. We also have a lot of comrades that were arrested during the NSAS that are still being kept in Kwanti.
An agreement was struck as the police hierarchy gave them the go-ahead to gather again, but not allow any infiltration by bad elements.
One thing they made clear is that despite the development earlier today, the encounter with the policemen, they are going to continue with these their demands in form of street protest in the next days to come. Tokumbo, Oyetunji, Arise News.
Today is a public holiday across Nigeria in recognition of Saturday's Democracy Day. As the country celebrates its 2 decades of democracy, we take a look at where we are as a nation and how far we have come. Take a listen.
It is 2 decades after the military handed power to a civilian leader. But after 20 years of democracy and 4 presidents, where is Nigeria today? Has life changed for the better for Nigerians?
I, Olusegun Obasanjo.
I, Olusegun Obasanjo.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will be faithful.
That I will be faithful.
And bear true allegiance.
And bear true allegiance.
To the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
To the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
A quick look at the country's economy. The World Bank data suggests that Nigeria's GDP has grown 6-fold since 1999. While that is impressive, economists and experts have argued that this growth has not translated to better quality of life for the average Nigerian. Though Nigeria's economy remains the biggest on the continent ahead of South Africa, it has not fully recovered from recession. Official figures show that unemployment stands at 23% and inflation at 11%. And how about the menace of corruption? President Muhammadu Buhari launched an anti-corruption drive after taking office in May of 2015. But Transparency International ranked Nigeria 144 out of 180 in its 2018 Corruption Perceptions Index. And according to PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC, if corruption is not dealt with immediately, it could cost Nigeria up to 37% of its GDP by 2030. While the fight against corruption is clearly not won, Nigeria faces more challenges. This time, security threats. Since 2009, northeastern Nigeria has been hit by security challenges. From Boko Haram insurgency to several bandit attacks and an increase in raids and killings by unknown gunmen targeting both civilians and several government formations. What does the future hold? Nigeria, no doubt, has come a long way. However, more needs to be done to keep it a democratic nation it says it is. As it marks 22 years of uninterrupted democratic governance, a reflection will remain major discussed in the country.
Okay, 3 issues there that we've been looking at. Let's start with the cooperation between the Nigerian Navy and the Ghanaian Navy. I think it's a very good development that, we're extending cooperation at the level of maritime cooperation to be able to monitor the Gulf of Guinea. The Gulf of Guinea is about 23 million kilometers long. I hope I got that. 2.3 million kilometers long, covering a number of countries from Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Sao Tome and Principe, all the way down to Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and all the way to Angola on the Atlantic Ocean. The interesting thing about the Gulf of Guinea is that it is a hotbed of piracy and criminal enterprise. And for this reason, many of the countries along the Gulf of Guinea have found it necessary to cooperate, to work together. And Nigeria and Ghana working together, will seem to be also in our very best interest in this country, because there's a lot of oil theft along our own coast, part of the coast, Bight of Benin and Bight of Biafra. Oil theft, piracy, all kinds of criminal activities taking place there. Recently, there was this Deep Blue project that Nigeria flagged off. We hope that when Minister Rotimi Amechi shows up, he will talk about that and how that fits into this attempt to police the Gulf of Guinea and our own maritime zone. You recall that when President Buhari had a conversation with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, one of the issues that came out was the request that the African Command, the U.S. African Command, should be moved close to the theater of operation. In that regard, the President was referring specifically to the Gulf of Guinea, to move it from Stuttgart to, near the theater of operation, to check even not just piracy, but also terrorism, banditry along the coastline. But we know how that played out. Nigeria, having originally, many years earlier, rejected the idea of an African command. But African countries coming together to secure their own space, I think is a good development. And I think that the Deep Blue project, will be part of strengthening the Nigerian end.